Welcome to the Send Talk podcast, your easy to understand guide to some of the most common queries we get asked when it comes to special educational needs and disabilities, or SEND. I'm your host, Vic Elizabeth Turnbull, and together with SENDIASS Manchester, the city's information, advice and support service for SEND, we'll empower you to make informed decisions for you or your child. You'll hear from the SENDIASS Manchester team, and also in this episode, a parent talking about their unique SEN journey and how things are from their own perspective. And they'll both join me online for a chat. In this episode, I'm with Laura Nardella, and she's a caseworker at SENDIASS Manchester, and we talk how to prepare for school meetings, and it also covers college and early years. In the next episode, right after this one, we cover tips for what happens at the meetings and during the follow-up. So without further ado, let's say hello to Laura, shall we?
Hi Vic, I'm a caseworker at the SENDIASS service in Manchester. So today we're going to be talking about preparing for school meetings. So I'm going to be giving parent carers advice as to what to do when you've got a school meeting coming and you need to prepare for it properly.
Right, let's get stuck into it then. So who is this episode useful for?
So I think this episode is useful for everyone who has a meeting with any educational establishment. So meetings which have to do with special educational needs. So talking about what's in place for your child in school, bringing up complaints, issues, what's not going right, transition planning meetings. So there's a lot of reasons to have meetings in schools, and this advice would be relevant to all of them. So one of the important things to just note right now is that if your child doesn't have an educational healthcare plan, so that would mean that they are on SEN support in school. School meetings are even more important because in a way it's the only record that you have as to what's been agreed, what's been planned. And so you don't have that formal process of the education healthcare plan.
And just to bust some jargon right at the beginning, what is an EHCP plan?
Okay. It's an EHC plan is an educational healthcare plan. So it's an official legal document which records a pupil's special educational needs and what provision will be in place for those needs. So there's other information there about health and social care as well. But in a nutshell, it basically means that you do have a document listing what's going to be in place to meet your child's educational needs.
We do have a specific episode coming up that focuses just on those EHCP plans, and we will post a link to that in the show notes. Before we start to get into the detail of meetings, is there a law surrounding this?
Well, there is some statutory guidance surrounding them. If that's okay with you, I'm going to read a little bit from there.
Go on then.
This is from the SEND Code of Practice. So that's the Special Educational Needs and Disabilities Code of Practice, which is basically a document which states clearly all the legal and statutory guidance for any organisation that has children with special educational needs. So that would include schools. So this is what schools should be following. In the SEND Code of Practice, it states in section 6.65, where a pupil is receiving SEN support, schools should talk to parents regularly to set clear outcomes and review progress towards them, to discuss the activities and support that will help achieve them and identify the responsibilities of the parent, the pupil, and the school. And schools should meet parents at least 3 times a year.
So, Laura, what does that mean? Break it down for me, please.
Was that not easy to understand there?
Not at all.
So, in a nutshell, it means schools do have the responsibility of identifying the needs of children with SEN. So that's that part of it. What's more relevant to us here is that it identifies that this should be done in meetings with the school, and also that parents should be included in this process, and also that the support should be reviewed. Now, what's important about that is reviewing means more meetings. And It also very handily states a minimum number of suggested meetings and it says, and I quote, schools should meet with parents at least 3 times a year. Obviously, that can be more if things are going wrong. But basically, it gives a clear guidance that for children with SEN, you should probably be meeting with school at least once a term just to see what's in place and what's going to be happening next. Just to summarise that, just in a nutshell, gives the parents the understanding that they have a right to school meetings.
So why is it important to prepare for a school meeting?
Believe it or not, we do actually get a lot of calls about school meetings, about parents saying, oh my God, I've got a school meeting. So it is something that is actually a big issue. So meetings are really important because regardless of whether your child's got an EHC plan in place or not, this is where the decisions actually get made. This is where the logistics of what's happening to your child in school gets agreed. And any parent with a child or a young person with special educational need will realistically have to attend numerous meetings. Meetings are the point where solutions can be found or things can go off course. And really, it's all about how to prepare for them to make sure that you get the best out of the school meeting.
I suppose it's like any meeting you go to, preparation will make it go smoothly.
And that's absolutely right. So before we start with getting into the preparing for school meetings, there's just one thing that I wanted to bring up, Vic. And I just wanted to acknowledge with any parent carers listening today, school meetings are really emotional. And that's one of the things that we notice when parents ring us up. I mean, they can feel a really wide range of emotions. They can feel really worried, anxious. They can feel defensive. It's nerve-wracking. It's scary. They can sometimes feel angry if it's something that's been going on for a long time. They can feel frustrated if they've had meetings before and maybe nothing's happened, and they can feel deflated or just sometimes intimidated at the thought of being in a room full of professionals. So I just wanted to make a note of that and saying it's absolutely fine. And every single parent carer that we speak to does actually feel that way. And one of the myths that I just want to bust right here, and something that we hear a lot from parents, is if I bring something up with the school, they'll be angry at me, they'll be angry at my child, and they won't treat my child well. So that's definitely not the case. Schools want to work with you and they want the best for your child as well.
I get that it can be so emotional. So does planning the meeting help with that?
Well, it does a bit, because whilst you're doing the preparation work, some of that emotion does come out. And I think that's one of the obstacles for parents to actually do the preparation work, because it does feel emotional. And so they think, I don't want to do that. But when you do prepare and you get some of the emotion out, it does actually help kind of to acknowledge how you're feeling about that. And that's perfectly fine.
Right. Let's get cracking. What's the first stage of preparing for a meeting?
So you need to ask for the school meeting. And before you ask for the school meeting, you need to think about, why do I need a school meeting? Why do I need this meeting? I mean, it sounds really obvious, but one of the things is that people say, I want to talk about my child. That's true, but what? Be specific about why the meeting's taking place. So what's the reason? So I'll give you an example that might help. A child with cerebral palsy in high school is unable to join in with PE lessons. She might be getting upset. There might be a lot of other things coming from it. But at the end of the day, you want to meet with the school because you want to make reasonable adjustments so that she doesn't have to attend them, or they can make changes to PE so that she can access them. So that's a really clear reason for having a school meeting. Another tip that I've got about asking for meetings is, don't wait for ages to call the meeting, because then you might have 100 things to discuss. So it's okay to just contact the school and have a short meeting about something very specific.
I figured out why I want the meeting. What happens next?
So depending on the reason for your meeting, it'll depend on who you want to meet with. So for example, the last example about the PE teacher, you probably want to meet with the PE teacher because they'll be able to give details on how the PE lesson could be changed or what the issues are about accessing it. And maybe you'll want to include the SENCO, but possibly in a secondary school, for example, the head of year who has responsibility for timetabling if they want to move her to another class whilst PE lessons taking place. So when you know what you're having your meeting about, it's usually quite clear who should be in attendance for that meeting. I'd say as a general tip for most meetings, the SENCO would be the main person who would have responsibility for children with SEN in schools, high schools and primary schools. So the SENCO should always be invited to the meeting.
And the SENCO is a special educational needs coordinator.
That's exactly right, yes. So it's a member of staff who has the responsibility to oversee the provision for children with SEN at that school. And just as an extra, you can invite people from outside the school to your meeting if it's relevant. So an example of that would be perhaps an educational psychologist or speech and language therapist, depending on the meeting.
Okay, so we've got the why, we've got the who. Am I asking for the meeting next?
Yes, we'll actually ask for this meeting, shall we? So asking for the meeting. It all seems really obvious and straightforward, but these are some areas where things can go wrong. All I can say is very straightforward. Ask for the meeting in writing. That will probably be by email. Send it to who you want to meet with. Explain your reasons why you want to have the meeting. Even if it's obvious to the school, it's just a really good record. And also explain who you want to meet with as well. So for example, if you're sending it to the SENCO, say, I would like the PE teacher, the head of year, etc., to join in. It also means that you can send that email invite to other professionals outside the school. Now, one thing that we have all the time with parents is that they say, I've asked for the meeting. So they've asked it verbally. They've maybe gone to the teacher and said, we need to meet about this. It perhaps wasn't clear that it was a request for a meeting, or people do actually forget to pass that on. Or there's miscommunication about why they want the meeting. So the parent will have said something, perhaps the teacher's not passed it on in the right way. So you can allow yourself to be misunderstood in that way. So it's dead straightforward. Send it by email. If no one responds, then there's a really easy way of chasing that up as well by resending the email. Once you've arranged the meeting, you've got the meeting date with the school, it might be a good idea to think about if you want someone to support you with at the meeting. So that could be, for example, a friend or a family member, or perhaps someone from a parent carer group or someone that you know and trust. It might sometimes be nice to have someone with you at that meeting, and you're perfectly entitled to request that. If you're going to be doing that, just always let the school know in advance.
So we've arranged the meeting, and I think the next step is one of the most important ones, isn't it?
It's the absolutely most important step, and that's actually doing your preparation for the meeting. And unfortunately, it's something that often doesn't happen at all.
How come?
It's so emotional. We've said before, you don't want to dwell on it. I mean, quite rightly, parents are the experts on their child, and probably to their friend, they know this issue inside and out. It's not something that they have to kind of rethink about or prepare for. So a lot of times they just think, right, I'm just going to rock up at this meeting and it'll all be fine.
Why not just rock up?
Meetings are emotional. And what happens is that you can quite easily go off track, be discussing something, and then you can come away thinking, oh, I forgot to say this, that, and the other. So basically, if you prepare what you want to say, you know that you're not going to forget anything. But also the actual process of preparing is really helpful in leading to a different and more constructive approach to the meeting, which I will share more about now if you want to hear about it.
Please do, yeah.
So the first step is to make notes on what you want to say, raise your concerns. You may have questions, or you may have points, or you may have information that you want to bring to the meeting, and start taking that down. One of the things that parents quite often worry about is a right way of doing it. So that kind of puts them off, or they feel like they have to write the perfect sentence. So I've got a few tips to help parents to actually start taking their notes and kind of get rid of that myth of the right way of doing it. So one of the things that might help was to write under headings of what's going well, a second one of what's not going well, and a third one of what needs to change. And you might want to group your discussion points under those. Now, one of the reasons is that sometimes it's really important to acknowledge what's going well, and also you want to keep those things. And then obviously the next 2 points are probably the reasons why you want to have the meeting. I always have this tip for parents, which is just get a piece of paper, put it on the side table somewhere, and over the next few days, just write anything that you want on it. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you repeat yourself or if what you're writing doesn't make sense. Just get it on the piece of paper. And I think sometimes what parents have found when I've asked them to do this is that they've written a lot on the first day, but then over the next 2 days, suddenly something's come up and said, oh, right, yeah, I forgot about that. So it allows you to get all your thoughts together.
And then after that, I imagine you can, after you've had that initial or that couple of days of jotting stuff down, you can then organise it.
Yeah, absolutely. And quite often, that's one of the things that I do with a parent at SENDIASS. So they've written everything down and then they can come with all the information and we can kind of group it. So it could be grouped into topics. So it could be something like, okay, these are questions about exam access. This is questions about learning needs. This is questions about something else. So you've got a meeting, you've got things to say about this particular topic. But why having that meeting? It's presumably to get something changed or to have some kind of outcome that you would like. And that's why the process really helps, because you then start to think about what do I want to achieve with this meeting? These are all my questions. What's an outcome that I want? And my top tip really for this whole podcast is be specific. Be as specific as you possibly can. Drill down into the details, because this is what's going to help you to get solutions.
So can you give an example to illustrate why being specific actually helps?
Yes. An example could be you want support for your child who is experiencing anxiety accessing school and being in school, which is leading to a lot of absences.
So I'd say to the school something like, I want more support for my child. He has high levels of anxiety and doesn't want to be in school, and the school needs to do something for him.
Well, yeah, okay, so that is actually true, but it doesn't provide any information on what the gaps are for this pupil. So people experience anxiety in a variety of different ways and for different reasons. And that information that you've given there really isn't specific enough. Think of it like being stressed about planning a party, for example. Okay, someone says, oh, you're stressed, Vic, let me help you. I'll help you plan it. But actually your stress is about that you don't have a car and how you're going to get all the stuff to the party and clean up afterwards. So them helping you plan it isn't really taking away your anxiety and stress. So basically that's an example to say that unless you identify the area where you have that need for support, you're not going to get the right support.
I get it. So then what would you advise in this situation for the family and the son with anxiety?
Okay, so let's say you know what you want to achieve with the meeting, so more effective support from the school, which will hopefully allow your child to be able to access the school more regularly. So this should lead you to a question. So what does that effective support look like for my son, specifically for my son? And another way of approaching this would be to ask, what is he finding really difficult and what might help him? This might seem overwhelming because you're not going to find one magic thing to get rid of his anxiety, but just think of it as putting small pieces of the puzzle in place. It's just laying the groundwork. So you're not solving the whole problem, but you've just got very clear ideas of what's going wrong, and the meeting is helping you put that in place. So in this example, I'd be looking at writing for my fictional child something like this. So I might state that he has trouble physically getting into the school. So transitions are hard. And this is something that happens for a lot of people. So once he's inside, it's less stressful, but it's just going over the threshold. He might get anxious during the school day because he doesn't know how to ask for help or where to go for help. So what he does is just avoid going in altogether. And he might also say that he hates the busyness of the corridors, and that can cause a lot of stress and anxiety. So that's another reason why he thinks, right, I'm going to avoid school altogether and just not turn up. So those would be my 3 points of where the gaps are for him.
Much more specific than my example.
Yeah, it is. And you can already see, even without knowledge of SEN, actually what might help in those situations. So it's already giving the school a starting point as to what solutions we could find. And it's also means that you've broken it down to sort of bite-sized portions. So we can solve those issues, but my son has anxiety does feel like an unsolvable problem.
Yeah, that's really effective, Laura.
If you have got an idea of what might work to sort of fill those gaps, you can then write those down, because that's a really good starting point for the school. So, for example, I'll give you an example about the busy corridors and lunchtime causing anxiety. You could suggest, could he be issued with an early exit card so he can leave every class 5 minutes early? And could he have an early access to lunch card? So just skip the crowds, and then he'll feel that there's a little bit less anxiety about that. So that's just an example, but parents shouldn't feel that they have to have all the solutions. If they make the gaps really clear, then they can go to school and say, what are your suggestions for these situations? And schools, more likely than not, will have come across these same issues before. And so they might know things that have already worked. So
we don't have to have all the answers.
You absolutely don't have to have the answers, but parents have got really, really good information and knowledge about their child. And what is often overlooked is that sometimes you do something at home that works really well. So if your child is struggling with transitions in school, you might have information at home because they've sometimes struggled with transitions at home. So parents should never underestimate themselves. There's not a right way of doing this for school. And at the end of the day, it's just a suggestion, and you should be open and flexible to negotiation about that. So you can suggest something and then see how would that fit in with the logistics of the school.
So we need to be specific about the issues that then can help lead to some solutions or very constructive meetings. Is there anything else we should be preparing then?
Yeah, there's just a few more bullet points on that. So just be realistic in what you want to achieve. And sometimes there's quite a lot of things to talk about. So prioritize what you want to talk about and maybe keep it to 3 or 4 things, depending on the length of your meeting. It's a lot better to actually sort 3 things out than to bring loads of things up and have no solutions, and then you'll just have to have another meeting. The next point that I want to say is actually another really important part of it, and it's sometimes something that gets forgotten, and it's trying to capture the child's voice. Now, I know for some parents, their child won't be able to share verbally what's important to them, but if your child is able to explain to you in any way what's important to them, what the issues are for them, then it's really important to sit down with them and take some time and to sort of take some notes and capture that under the child's voice. Now, a little tip that I've got, because a lot of people say to me, oh, my child would just say, it's fine, and not want to speak to me about it, especially if they're teenagers. So sometimes what I say, if they can write or if they can speak to you, just say, if you could change 3 things in school right now, what would they be? And it doesn't matter what it is. It could just be anything. Usually children can come up with that because it's only 3 things and it's about what's important to them. There's no right or wrong answers. I've had kids saying, I don't want to sit behind that boy in science lesson anymore. And so they just rearranged the classroom. No one would have been able to guess that that was something that was upsetting him. And the reason that you need to capture your child's voice is that you will be making change that are meaningful for your child in the meeting. Every meeting that I've been to where there has been the child's voice that's been captured in some way or another and shared, everyone has been really appreciative of it. And the teachers have been really thankful, and they've been grateful that they've been able to see it from the child's point of view. So it's a really important thing to do.
Because also the decisions that you're making and the futures that you're planning are theirs.
Absolutely. And sometimes with all the best will in the world, parents and schools and even professionals will all get together and go, yeah, let's do this. This will be amazing. And we're putting loads of resources into it. And then it just doesn't work. And so we're just missing that extra bit of the child's voice. So once you've done all your prep work, so perhaps you've got some notes on what you want to talk about in the meeting, and perhaps you've got another sheet of paper that has the child's voice or points that your child's raised on it. The next thing to do is to share your notes in advance with the other people attending the meeting. Now, if you've got really long notes that you've written for yourself, you might want to just have bullet points on what you want to talk about so that the other people know in advance what needs to be discussed. Now, the reason that's helpful is that if you're going to be talking about access arrangements, for example, for a child, it's good for the teachers to kind of then think, oh, they want to talk about that. Let's get some background knowledge, and it'll stop any time wasting at the meeting. So it'll mean that people come prepared, ready to talk about the issues at hand.
I imagine some parents might be like, oh, I don't want to send anything. I don't want them to know what we're going to be talking about.
I know, and that's okay. Bullet points are just fine. It's kind of like setting the agenda, and it's a great way of taking control of the meetings, because you just straight away say, this is what I want to talk about. And you can always say to the teachers, if you want to add anything, if there's something you want to bring up, then you can add to that. Another thing that is really important to remember as well is if anyone else is bringing any reports to this meeting, that you could ask them to share them in advance so that you're prepared as well, so you have time to read them.
It works both ways.
Absolutely, yes. We want everyone to be prepared and ready to go at this meeting, not to 60.
Thanks, Laura. Now, let's hear from a parent who's experienced and prepped lots of school meetings. Here's Siarah to tell you the steps she's taken to ensure her school meetings run very smoothly. I start off by asking her about her child and why a school meeting was needed in the first place. And this interview features a story about child loss. Now, we're going to have a chat about preparing for school meetings. But before we get cracking, tell me a little bit about you and your children and your family.
So I'm Siarah. I'm 35, soon to be 36, but I still feel 25. Always lived in Manchester born and bred. So I have one son, he's 4 years old and he's in primary school, mainstream primary school at the moment. I work as a children's nurse, qualified in 2008. Despite being a mum for 4 years, it's really hard taking off that nurse head. And because he's got lots of medical conditions, I'm not only his mum, I'm very much his nurse. So that's my job 24/7, being mum and being nurse. It's been very stressful just because he was born at 25 weeks gestation.
Whoa.
Yes, 3 months early. I have been pregnant before, so back in 2015, and the same thing happened, unfortunately, where I delivered when I was 19 weeks instead, so a lot earlier, but my first didn't make it. I was very much told that it's a 25% chance of delivering early or having a miscarriage, and just because it's happened, it might not happen again. And lo and behold, it did happen again, but thankfully I was able to get to my third trimester, being 25 weeks. But I've very much been told now that every pregnancy, I've got a 99.9% chance to always deliver early. So the last 7 years have been really stressful, disheartening, but empowering. You know, good challenges, bad challenges, but we've survived and we've got through it. I am scared to try again because I know how hard it is to raise a premature baby. I just need to make sure that I've got the strength to potentially do it all over again. So with my little one having lots of medical conditions, health needs, he's developmentally delayed, I just want things to be as settled as possible for him before I take that next step in life.
It's a big decision, isn't it?
Definitely.
Were your son's challenges some of the reasons why you've had school meetings in the past?
Definitely. So the fact that he was born 3 months early guaranteed him to be developmentally delayed. So he has been delayed from birth, but I felt that within the first year of life, whether it's because I was on maternity leave, and when I'm on a mission, I'm quite intense, and every day we were doing lots of exercises, lots of activities to help him to catch up. So in that first year of life, he was actually catching up quite quickly. But then sadly, from being 1 year old, that gap in terms of how delayed he is has increased and increased and increased. So he's been in nursery full time since being 1 year old, corrected. And even though it was nursery, a private nursery, so not quite school, but I feel like meetings have been taking place quite early on in his life for that reason, that he's delayed, he needs to be held back. He's been in the baby room in nursery for a significant period of his life. So even though he's been in a school setting since September of last year, I feel like I've been inundated with meetings, whether it's nursery staff or school staff, because of his health needs and his developmental delay.
Thinking back to the first school meeting you had,
I distinctively remember I was emailed by his class teacher, and it was because even though I'd given them a handover over the phone to explain his situation, his history, his needs, they only, I guess, really realised until he started in class. And literally after the first day, things were deteriorating quite rapidly. Lots of challenges which they just weren't expecting. They weren't expecting it to be that intense or that severe. So I got emailed with their concerns, and it was awful. I just literally remember reading this really long email and I couldn't sleep. I thought, oh my God, that's it. He's going to be excluded.
Oh no.
It was really daunting. It was awful. And even though as a children's nurse, because I've been in school meetings as a professional for the past 14 years, I never thought it would hit me this hard, being invited to a meeting to talk about my son. Yeah, didn't feel great.
For that very first school meeting, did you get any help to prepare for it?
For that first meeting, no. I didn't know about SENDIASS at that point. They hadn't been recommended to me. Nobody shared their service with me, which is a real shame, to be honest. So I didn't reach out for support. I did try to speak with the head teacher going, oh, what's this meeting about? Because I did start to panic. I did start to worry. But even though once I got that email to request a meeting, the meeting didn't take place until like 2 weeks later. So it was just all those 2 weeks of dread. And I really should have reached out for support. And if I had done, it would have helped that anxiety and that worry.
So you were worrying for 2 weeks about this meeting. What happened on the day then when you went to this meeting?
Yeah, it was actually not as bad as what I was probably anticipating. So in the meeting, it was his class teacher, the head teacher and the school SENCO. And it was very much to share the difficulties that they had been experiencing with my son, but actually what they can actually do about it to help support him in that class setting moving forward. So they registered him on the Special Educational Needs Register. They started to apply for an EHCP. But it was also my opportunity to share with them his background and that he's not doing it on purpose. He just does not have that awareness of how to behave, what to do, how to communicate. So it ended up being a really productive meeting. And even though I've had lots of meetings since, I don't think I felt as worried compared to that first one.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's because it was such a positive meeting in the end compared to what I was anticipating, and based on the information that I got in that email, I was naturally, like I said, dreading the worst. I was dreading for them to say, I'm sorry, he can't be in this school. And I think it's because previous nurseries, when they have discussed EHCPs with me, they were very much, he needs to be in a special needs school. And not that I've got anything against special needs schools, I think they're fantastic. I've just always wanted to exhaust a mainstream school first, put all the support possible in place first, and by doing that, if everything's been exhausted and if it's not working, then yeah, absolutely, then he needs to be in a special needs school. So I was always worrying, again from previous experiences, that they'll just say to me, I'm sorry, it's not working out, you need to apply for a special needs school.
And so Knowing what you know now about meetings and the positive experience you had during that first meeting, how do you approach school meetings now?
I feel like I've learned so much since that first meeting, and probably one of my latest meetings where I requested for SENDIASS to be present, and all the conversations I've had with them to prepare for meetings and the reports to create and thinking of things from different angles. I feel like now that I know that and I've experienced it, I feel like I can just continue to transfer that now for future meetings, where this is what I need to do to prepare, to have all my thoughts, points, opinions all written down so I know I'm not relying on memory. And this is what I did at the last meeting, clearly identifying what is it that my son needs and what will actually happen to him as a result if he doesn't receive this support. So it creates a much stronger argument as to why, not that it's an argument, but it's a case.
Mm-hmm. Of course, yeah.
To justify the level of support he needs. So I just feel a lot more prepared and a lot more confident going into future meetings.
Confidence is key, isn't it? And how preparation can help boost that confidence in you as well.
Definitely.
Tell me about that, and then that support from SENDIASS. What have they given you?
They've given me so much more support than I ever expected, that I'm still overwhelmed in a positive way. I remember ringing them for advice and they returned my call literally within the hour.
Oh, wow.
And that's fantastic. That response time was like, wow, that's amazing. They're listening. They want to help. So I was then allocated a caseworker, and every time I needed to speak with them, again, I would always receive a really response reply via phone call, via emails. And I don't think as parents we need to feel bad about asking for help. And I feel like from the very specific advice that they gave me in terms of writing down all those points, creating that report to have all the information that I would like to share at that meeting, so having that all written down in advance and really focusing on the support that our children need and what will happen as a result if that support isn't available. Like, I wouldn't have thought of that if SENDIASS hadn't have told me that.
So there'll be lots of parents listening to this podcast episode thinking, I could not do what she's done. Have you got any advice for parents that are listening?
I never thought that I would worry about attending a meeting about my child, and lo and behold, it has caused anxiety, it has caused worry, despite all my knowledge and my experience. But by completing that preparation, I think that's what's really held me in good stead. I think worry and anxiety can affect anybody, but by believing in yourself, staying calm, having those points, even if it's just a few bullet points, really voice your concerns, your worries, and that's the best you can do for your child.
Thanks for listening to this Send Talks podcast episode. And part 2 of this episode is all about what happens during and after those school meetings. And you can listen to that right now in the same place you listen to this one. For more detailed information about the topics we discussed in this episode, we have a range of fact sheets that you can download from the SENDIASS Manchester website. Simply head to sendiassmanchester.org.uk. That's SENDISS Manchester.org.uk. If you still have questions about your child or yourself, you can contact the SENDIASS Manchester helpline. Just leave your name and number on the answer machine and we'll phone you back, usually on the same day, to listen to your queries and then offer you advice. And that number for the SENDIASS Manchester helpline is 0161 209 8356. That's 0161 209 8356. Or you can email the parents' inbox. That email address is parents@manchester.gov.uk. That's parents@manchester.gov.uk. Another great resource is the independent provider of special education advice. They're also known as IPSEA, I-P-S-E-A. They have guides, a helpline and lots more. Just head to their website, that's ipsea.org.uk, ipsea.org.uk. And all those details are in the show notes for this episode. A big thank you to everyone who's contributed their stories and expertise to this episode. The big thing to remember is that you are not alone on this journey, so please do share this episode with the people, parents and carers who you think will find it useful.